just try to get back up and not show any signs of weakness.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be looking back at Monday's 7 games. We're going to be having a look at the top 20 players in fantasy over the last 2 weeks, and then also previewing Tuesday's 5-game slate in the NBA. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
All right, let's get to it indeed. We will start where we always do in these shows, and that is
monstrous line of the night.
I don't know who else it could have been, but Jim Harden of the Houston Rockets. Actually, it could have been someone else, but Harden gets the nod. 54 points with 7 triples, 8 rebounds, 13 assists, and 3 steals. A monstrous 17 of 32 from the field and 13 of 15 from the line. He is the number 1 player in fantasy this season. So many people overthought their selections in the draft at pick number 2 behind Anthony Davis. I'm going to take Gianni there. I'm going to take LeBron James there. So many people overthinking that decision. And as I said in the preseason so many times, yes, Antetokounmpo could improve. Look, he could become even as good as Harden, using that Family Guy Peter Griffin boat analogy. And Harden is just doing what he does, averaging 31.5 points with 5 rebounds, 8 assists, over 2 steals, over 4 threes. His usual brilliance from the line, 10 attempts at 83%. He is just doing what he does, and we continue to... Actually, that's not true. We, and I guess the majority of you, don't discount what he does because we just know what we're going to get from Harden. He is the safest pick in fantasy, and he is showing us that again. Another monstrous line of the night for Jimmy Harden.
Waiver wire line of the night.
That goes to Markieff Morris of the Washington Wizards. Morris has been fantastic since moving to the bench. He's rostered in only 44% of Yahoo leagues, so he is available in many different formats. 41 minutes in the overtime game against the Rockets today, a game that the Wizards won. He had 22 and 10 with 3 triples and 2 steals. Shot the ball very, very well. 8 of 12 from the field and 3 of 4 from the line. But since moving to the bench, his numbers have been impressive. Over the last 4 games, which is those 4 games that he has moved to the bench, he is in that time a top 50 player, averaging 16 and 7 with 2 triples and 1.5 steals, shooting 47 and 86%. Now, those percentages aren't extremely high. Last season, he shot 48% from the field. The year before, he shot 46%. He's shooting 41% from 3, which is a bit of a step up, but he was at 37 last season, 36% over the course of this season. But what has happened is his minutes have gone up. Kelly Oubre moved into the starting lineup. He's been pretty useless. He's getting like mid-20s in minutes, and Morris is bumping his minutes up. Now, what is also happening in this time is Dwight Howard has been out, so it's hard to know how much of it is just Markieff moving to the bench and playing well, or how much of it is to do with the fact that Howard is out. But even at the beginning of the season, Morris wasn't this effective without Howard, although in his first 5 games of the season, when Dwight did sit out, Morris scored in double digits in all of those ones. He is a relatively limited upside player, but if he's going to be getting this sort of playing time and putting together these sort of lines, it's pretty tough to ignore Markieff Morris at this point. We don't know when Dwight Howard's going to be back with his back/buttocks issue, and Morris is clearly outplaying Kelly Oubre. The Wizards are going with this different rotation, more minutes for Otto Porter, more minutes for Markieff Morris, and he is shooting the ball very well, but as I said, it's not an unsustainable level of shooting, 40% from 3 and 48% from the field. These aren't crazy type numbers that we're seeing from Morris. So I don't think that we should be looking at this as some sort of real fluky type performance. I think that he can have some decent level of value. The upside is pretty limited though. He's not likely to be a top 70 type of guy or a top 80 sort of a player, but I think he can be a top 120, a top 100 sort of a guy, at least in this short term while Dwight Howard remains out. So Markieff Morris could be someone who is on your wire that you can pay some attention to. Guys, we have a new sponsor for today's show. This episode is sponsored by HawksHeat. HawksHeat makes the world's best battery-heated clothing. Heat on demand with the touch of a button. Control your environment with Action Heat. It's clothing that is engineered to safely and efficiently deliver heat via heating panels that are similar to a heated car seat. So for all of you guys over in the States, in Canada, in the Northern Hemisphere, with winter coming up, I know you guys live in some cold environments, Action Heat could be a great way for you to get through those cold winter months. The clothing is powered by 5-volt lithium-ion batteries, and the temperature can reach up to 135 degrees, and I hope to God that that's Fahrenheit and not Celsius. Otherwise, you'll be coming out with some pretty significant burns. The batteries last up to 12 hours, and they can be recharged by using your phone while you're wearing it. So anyone who likes, or who's in a cold weather environment, who likes going skiing, likes going out to the snow, Action Heat is going to be a fantastic Christmas gift for you, to yourself, or to any members of your family, friends, any loved ones that you need to buy gifts for. We've got a special deal for our listeners to save 20% off your entire order. You just go to actionheat.com/lockedon to check out everything Action Heat has to offer. That's actionheat.com/lockedon, or use the coupon code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's one word, locked on, to save 20%. Stay toasty warm while you enjoy all your outdoor activities this winter with Action Heat, and we thank them for sponsoring this podcast. Let's move on to the deep leaguer of the night. It is Michael KiddGilchrist of the Charlotte Hornets returned from his ankle injury and had a pretty solid game. Now, he does very well against the Bucks. They play him more at center. Only 18 minutes of action for KiddGilchrist, but he had 7 points. He hit a 3, which is an absolute rarity in itself. 7 rebounds, 1 assist, but it's the defensive numbers that boosted his value up significantly here. 1 steal and 2 blocks for KiddGilchrist. He is rostered in only 5% of Yahoo leagues. He's a top 200 player this season. Yeah, and granted, he did just miss a big chunk of games. He missed the last 6 games with that ankle issue. But prior to that, he should have been rostered in significantly more leagues than this, as I said, as a top 175 guy for the season, averaging 8.5 and 6 rebounds with 1.4 blocks. So giving you positive value in that blocks column. Getting 1.5 blocks out of a guy who's a small forward eligible player is something that can... I don't think you can really overstate it how rare that is, and that's what KiddGilchrist can provide for you playing at that center position. He could even be a streamer option in, say, 14-team leagues. He's more of a 16 to 18-team league guy at this point, but he's back in action. He's got a spot in the rotation, and he's going to provide those rebounds, he's going to provide those blocks, and he's going to do it with relatively solid field goal percentage. So Michael KiddGilchrist is your deep leaguer of the night.
Young gun of the night.
The young gun of the night goes to Time Machine Kurt Heinrich. That is Ryan Archer-Jacquinot, who had his best game as a member of his best game in the NBA. Let's be honest, 36 minutes, 22 points with 4 triples. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals. You would think that he has the backup point guard job locked down when Chris Dunn returns. And of course, for now, he is the starting point guard. He is over the last month, he's a top 150 player in those 30 minutes, averaging 7.5, 3 and 4. It's those 4 assists, it's the 2 threes, and it's the 1.1 steals, which are obviously really relevant for fantasy. He's nothing more than a stream type of a player, but 4 assists over a steal, 2 threes, that can be really useful. They are significant positives in those categories, and Chris Dunn might be back next week. That's looking like when him and Punch Bob Shiplock are looking to return, even Larry Markkinen, around that first week of December. But for the next week or so, you could get some value out of Archer-Jacquinot. The problem is the Bulls don't play again until Wednesday, and then Friday, 2 really high volume days, so you probably can't utilize him then. Maybe on the Saturday against the Rockets, where there is a smaller amount of games, you might be able to use Arch. He's more of still just that 16-team, 14-team league guy. But he's putting up these numbers and will continue to be solid enough until Chris Dunn returns. So Ryan Archer-Jacquinot is your young gun of the night. The dud of the night. This bloke has racked up quite a few of these. Dario Saric of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Only 18 minutes in this one for Saric. 9 points and 6 rebounds, and that's it. He was 4 of 10 from the field, 1 of 1 from the line, no assists, no steals, no blocks, and he is outside the top 160 for this season. I don't really see a scenario where that's improving significantly. He is not a 10-team league guy. He is not a 12-team league guy. He is a 14-team league player at best, and if his minutes are going to vary from 27 down to 20, depending on what Tom Thibodeau is doing on a nightly basis with him and Taj Gibson, then even in a 14-team league, you might be struggling to hold on to Saric. He was struggling in Philadelphia, and now he's in a situation where the minutes just aren't going to work in his favor. So it's a pretty clear drop for Saric in 10 and 12 team leagues, still rostered in 75% of leagues on Yahoo, which is nonsense. It is way, way too high. Him and Terry Rozier are probably the two most over-rostered players on all of Yahoo. You need to get rid of Saric if you are still holding on to him. If you do any one thing that I say to do, or I don't say to do anything because you don't have to listen to shit that I say, but if you're going to follow one thing, drop Dario Saric. There is just no point in holding on to him at this point unless big injuries go down, and we can't really predict that. But you're just holding onto a dud at this stage. The plus-minus GOATs, the best net rating went to Andre Iguodala, who was a plus 102.7 in the starting lineup, but it looks like next game either Steph and Draymond will return, or at least one of those guys, and that'll likely push Iguodala back to that bench role, and he's not really having any sort of fantasy impact. While the worst net rating of the day went to Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic, who actually finished this game in the locker room with a back issue. Didn't return, only played the 22 minutes, so that's something we'll have to monitor with him moving forward. Let's actually go through the injury news. I touched on all these already, but Steph Curry is going to be full go at practice on Tuesday. The Warriors don't play again until Thursday, so it's likely, unless there's any sort of setback in practice the next 2 days, he'll be back on Thursday. And Steve Kerr said for Draymond,
"You can call me Coach Steve."
That Draymond Green would return at some point on this upcoming road trip, but that could be Thursday, it could be across the weekend. So we'll have to see with Draymond Green when he is back. It's likely Steph is back Thursday. Draymond with his toe is going to be back in the next couple. And then Aaron Gordon missed had to sit out the second half of today's game with that back issue. If he misses time, Jarrell Martin becomes your deeper league ad. And of course, Johnny Isaac would likely start at power forward. And so many people in the first half of today's game, we'll talk about Isaac in a second, man, I've got to drop Isaac. Then he had 11 points in the third quarter and showed that he still can be a useful player. I still believe in him as a 12-team league guy. His steal rate is so far down to begin this season, and if that bounces back to what he did in his rookie season, what he did in college, what he did in preseason, what he did in summer league, so all of those things all tied in almost the same with his steal rate. The start of this season, not the same, so there's a huge room for that to go back up. And then his value goes back up to being a 1.5 steal, 1.5 block type of guy, which is insanely valuable in fantasy. And then if you can have some of these offensive type nights like we had tonight, then a big step forward. But he could be getting a little bit of a reprieve there with Gordon battling that back problem. If you guys own a company like HawksHeat and are looking to get your company out to more people, you can advertise on this podcast. Podcast listeners are 60% more likely to interact with the sponsors that they hear on their favorite podcasts. Our demographic is 98% male, higher educated and higher earning than your traditional media audiences. So have your company sponsor this podcast by emailing me at redrockfantasybasketball@gmail.com. Let's get into these games now and break down the 7 that we had across the NBA on Monday to begin Week 7. The first one of these games we'll talk about is the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Wolves win 102-95. Bob Cove had 24 points with 4 triples, 7 rebounds, 2 steals and 2 blocks. He has been, aside from that terrible shooting performance across the weekend, really strong in Minnesota, continuing his elite fantasy numbers, while Andy Wiggins did not close the game for the second consecutive game. Derrick Rose was on the court there. Now, they did ask Tom Thibodeau about this after the game, and he said it was more just a matchup thing. We wanted someone to do more penetrating.
Giggity.
So he had Derrick Rose out there, but he said the majority of the times Wiggins will be out there closing games. He only had 11 points and shot poorly, but at least we had some other contributions. And this is what he needs to do to become a useful fantasy guy. 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. So there's an element of flukiness there with those steals and block numbers from Wiggins. But if he can start to bring that in, then the value will remain. I'm not quite at a situation where he's a drop, but he could be a 10-team league drop if things don't improve. Townsy had 21 and 10, and Jeff Teague had 13 and 6.
My name is Jeff.
Plus a weird 3 blocks. That's a little fluky. Well, Derrick Rose. Now, this Derrick Rose game, he was fine on the court. 12, 1 and 4 on 46% shooting and missed both of his threes with no steals, no threes, as I said, and only the 1 block. I think this is a more and it's a fine line, but it's more representative of what we can expect from Rose moving forward. Not a guy who's shooting 56% from three and 60% from the field and doing what he'd been doing. This is fine. This is borderline 12 team. So he is a must roster guy, but if he reverts back to type and plays these 30 minutes and does this, then that's a real borderline type of guy. So he is definitely someone to watch. With Saric struggling, Gibson played 30 minutes and had 7 and 8. Clearly he is not a 12-team league player either. For the Cavs, Larry Drew was forced into playing Larry Nance. Imagine playing one of your best players. Must be real tough. Nance played 38 minutes, had 12, 8, and 7, 1 steal and 2 blocks, and we, as fantasy people, we know that Larry Nance can go out and produce. The problem has been that he has been literally restricted to being the backup center to Tristan friggin' Thompson all season. Now, it requires an injury to Kevin Love, to Sam Decker, a trade request from J.R. Smith, and then an injury for David Nwaba for him to go back to be starting at power forward. So I don't know what this means. Literally the game before this, Nance played 18 minutes solely as probably even less, solely as the backup to Tristan Thompson, and that's not enough. But if we're going to see him play as a power forward, and realistically for this team that's going absolutely nowhere, they should be seeing what he can provide as that starting center. Yeah, that's where the value comes. But we don't know that that's going to happen. We just can assume that when Decker could be back next game, Nwaba could be back next game, and then what minutes does Nance get? Does he just, Tristan Thompson plays 36 minutes and Nance gets 12 minutes backing him up? So if you have an open roster spot, you can go and add Nance, but who knows where it goes because Drew has been so reticent to use him at power forward or to play him in preference to Tristan Thompson, the two things that we need to happen for him to have fantasy value, that it's really hard to expect that to go on. Now, this was fantastic. It should get you really turgid, but will it happen again? It's all going to come down to what Larry Drew says. Nothing to do with his ability. It's just, will he get on the court for long enough? That's the real question. Thompson was great, 16 and 11 with 3 assists. At some point, he's going to drop off, but he played 40 minutes. He's getting a shit ton of rebounds, and he is a rosterable guy in 12-team formats. Kyle Korver got hot. He had 22 points in 22 minutes with 6 triples. Don't bite on that. While Rocket Rodney Hood did his thing, 20 points with 16 shots. He's a points and threes type of a guy. Has some back-end 12-team value, as does Geordie Clarkson, although this was a real shit one from Clarko. 4 and 2 in 22 minutes. Now, I talked about the young bull Colin Sexton quite a bit and how hot his mid-range shooting was and how it was going to be impossible to continue. That was clearly the case here. 5 of 19 for 11 points. But in all due fairness to Sexton, he added 7 rebounds. He added 4 assists, 2 things which have been really lacking in his game. Now, he hit no threes, he had no steals, he had no blocks. And that's what's always going to make it hard for him to be this excellent fantasy guy. But at least he had those assists, he had some rebounds here. But what he was doing and the efficiency with which he was playing, it was never going to be able to stick. And even with that hot run, where over the last 7 games, he's averaged 19 points per game, he's the 131st ranked fantasy player. And that's with shooting 47% from the field, because he just doesn't do anything in those other categories. You still want to roster him in 12-team leagues, but it's why he's likely to be an Andrew Wiggins type player rather than a Robert Covington type player. Guys who, his value is just highly concentrated in points, in the points category, with very little contribution in those other areas. A bit of a stinker from Chetty Osman, 8 points on 12 shots. I still think he is a 12-team league guy, but he is probably going to be your 12th or 13th guy on the roster, which means that he is open for dropping and adding and all those sorts of good things. Let's go on to the next game of the Houston Rockets and the Washington Wizards. The Wizards win in overtime, 135-131. Another 38 minutes for Clint Capella, 17 and 14 with 4 blocks. His minutes total are through the roof. As you'll hear a little bit later in the audio version of this show, he is in the top 10 players for the last 2 weeks in fantasy. Putting up massive numbers. The free throws have been improved as well. Eric Gordon thrives when one of Chris Paul and Jim Harden are out. Paul was out, so we had 43 minutes from Eric Gordon, 36 points with 8 triples. Obviously a must-roster guy, but when Paul comes back, he could be a fringe 10-team league guy after that. We've seen that all season. Daniel House was signed this morning, played 28 minutes. 4 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist. With no Paul and no Green, he was forced into those minutes. He's likely not going to be a rotation guy when those guys are back. While the Comet Gary Clark is struggling at the moment. He is just a deeper league player. While Marquise Chris It's his third season. I like to give guys 3 years, but he is terrible. He 3 fouls in 5 minutes. I don't know why he even came in for those minutes. He is just absolutely a dreadful player. The Washington Wizards, 50 minutes for Bradley Beal. 32 points, 4 assists and 2 blocks, and Scott Brooks said he's going to have to reduce his minutes. He played 45 over the weekend as well, while Johnny Wall had 36, 3, and 11 with a pair of blocks. Big minutes once again from Otto Porter. 37 minutes, 14 and 6 with 3 steals. It looks like he is back on track, and whatever issue there was with Otto banging Scott Brooks's missus, cousin, mother, daughter, whatever it was, that appears to have been sorted, and his minutes are fine. While Kelly Oubre he's not good. It's simple as that. He is not a good fantasy player. I don't think he's a good NBA player. 20 minutes, 4 and 4 for Oubre. He is just that 16-team league. I don't care that he is a starter. He's in that Colin Sexton mode of players who can put up the occasional big shooting sort of performance and then do very, very little else. So it doesn't really render him as a must-roster player in any situation. Not true, in any standard situation. Thomas Bryant started again for Dwight, hasn't clicked over 20 minutes in any of these starts. 4 and 3 with 2 blocks. He can block shots, he can hit threes, but interestingly, with Howard out, we've had no Jan Mahinmi, no Jason Smith, and the only center on this team is Bryant, and he's not even getting 20 minutes. So the Wizards are really embracing the small ball with more of those minutes for Markieff Morris and for Jeff Green.
My name is Jeff.
The next game we take a look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They lost to the Charlotte Hornets 107-110. Yanni had 20, 13, and 9 with a steal and 3 blocks. A big night there, while Bledsoe had 17 with 4 assists and 2 steals. And Brookie Lopez had 15 and 8. Bledsoe's a great reminder why you don't panic after the first 10 games or so. Oh, what trash, wasted my 5th round pick. Nah, look, he's fine. He's just getting back to doing what he does. While Malcolm Brogdon putting in some big minutes, 37 minutes. Last season, under the genius that was Joe Prunty and Jason Kidd, we had Brogdon sharing minutes with Tony Snell, or Snell playing over Brogdon, when that's clearly nonsense. Snell played 8 minutes here, Brogdon played 37. That is the minute split. I thought that we'd go a little bit more towards 29 minutes for Brogdon and 20 minutes for Snell, that sort of arrangement, but clearly Brogdon is better and has outplayed him, and therefore his value has snuck back up. He's still only rostered in 76% of leagues, Malcolm Brogdon, so he is available in 10s and 12s, and I'd be okay to look at him there. The big ragu, Dante DiVincenzo, returned it. Pat Connaughton got most of those wing minutes. 26 minutes for Connaughton, 15 and 5 with 3 triples. A nice mid-sized league sort of a player, 16-teamer, but nothing too special there. While Thon Maker, only the 6 minutes for Thon with a block, and not really taking advantage of the fact that the Muppet is out, John Henson, and Ersan Ilyasova, who it was announced he was going to play, and then he was sitting on the bench in a sexy-looking suit. For the Hornets, Jeremy Lamb is crushing it at the moment. 37 minutes for Lammy. 21, 8, and 4 with 2 steals. At the start of the season, he was splitting minutes evenly with Malik Monk. He was the guy, Lamb was the guy that I wanted in the pre-draft process, and then when they were getting equal minutes, I was thinking, maybe you should keep Monk because the upside's higher. But now it's pretty clear that Lamb is the guy. Top 50 player over the last 2 weeks, averaging 19 and 7. Shooting the ball well, and playing 33 minutes a night, more importantly. Malik Monk, after his career high, went back to 21 minutes and had 7 points, but at least back in the rotation, taking some of those minutes away from Miles Bridges. While Nick Batum, an absolute stinker of a game, only 7% usage from Batum, 7 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. Now, he's been able to get away in the past by having low usage, by putting up good assist numbers. 5.5 last season, 5.9 the year before, 5.8 the year before. This season, 3.6. The Borrego offense is not suited to Batum. They are not using him as a playmaker. Now, he is still a top 100 player this season, despite averaging 9 points. It's the 5.5 boards, it's the steal, it's the 3.5 assists. But over the last 2 weeks, he's outside the top 150, and this is while shooting 48 and 88 is his percentages. The numbers have just dipped. He's not blocking any shots in those last 2 weeks, which is a small part of his value. I think in a 10-team league, you might consider moving on from Batum. I'm still a big Batum guy, but I'm at this stage now where I just don't think the assists are coming back. So if you were relying upon that, I think you're getting dicked over by the way that this offense is being used and the fact that he's just not a bigger part of it as he was before. Kemba Walker, 21, 6, and 5 with 2 steals. I'm a massive Kemba fan. I've been on record saying it plenty of times this season that I didn't think he's going to be able to keep up the level of play that he has. He's the 9th ranked player over the season, and we're seeing that now. Now, over the last week, he's still averaging 21 points with 8 assists and 2.5 threes. but he's down to the 33rd ranked player because the shot has started to drop off. Only 37% shooting, 36 from 3. And I think that we can see him settle into that mid-second round range rather than that top 10 player. So if anyone wants to send you a top 10 guy in exchange, say the fun guy Kawhi Leonard, I'd be doing that in an absolute heartbeat for Kemba Walker. Marvin Williams with another big game as well, 16 and 8 with 4 triples. This was one of those games where the Hornets went really small, so his minutes were bumped up. They do that against the Bucks. That's 2 really strong games from Marvin in a row. I'm not buying it for 12-team formats. 14-teamers, I'll add him and I'll see what happens, but I'm not buying it for 12-team leagues just at this point. The next one we look at is the Boston Celtics beating the Pelicans pretty comfortably, 124-107. Jaylen Brown was out, so Marcus Smart started. He played 40 minutes. He had 8 points, 2 triples, 5 assists, a steal, and a block. And Kyrie Irving was pretty aggressive in his statements after the game that he wants Marcus Smart starting. He didn't come out and say Smart should be starting, but what he said in his words, you could infer that he wants Marcus to continue to start over Jaylen Brown. We'll see how that goes. Brown has been atrocious all season from a fantasy point of view, and from a real-life perspective, he hasn't been that great. Neither Smart nor Brown are 12-team league players, regardless of how that starting situation shakes out. 30 minutes for Markieff Morris, 9, 10, and 11. It was a good night for the Morris twins. He's a real fringe 12-team sort of guy. I don't really care that he starts or not. He's putting up some good numbers here, but his inability to get assists, steals, and blocks and generally be low efficiency does cap his upside. Tatum had 20 and 7 with 3 steals. Horford had 20 and 4 with 3 steals and a block, while Gordie Hayward was a real turd from Hayward. 5, 4, and 4 in his 23 minutes. Did have a 1-1. If anyone drops him, I am all over grabbing Gordo, because prior to this, he was a top 70 player over the last 2 weeks, despite the bench role and the limited minutes. On to the Pelicans. Tone Davis returned, had 27 and 16, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. Big night there. But Drew Holiday struggled. Only the 8 shot attempts for Drew, had 8 turnovers as well. The other numbers are okay. 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, but not his best night. While Mirotic played 37 minutes and had 25 and 5. With Davis back, Julius Randle's minutes evaporated. 15 points in 21 minutes for Randle. Still a must-roster guy, but he was getting those 35, 36-minute nights when Davis is out. That's not realistic to continue. We saw Solomon Hill return to the rotation. That was interesting. It took basically all of Ian Clark's minutes. And Etuan Moore had an absolute stinker. 5 points in 26 minutes for Moore. I said it plenty of times about Moore that he was shooting at an unsustainable rate, but while the ball was going in, he had value, but he doesn't do anything in these other areas. And despite how well he has been shooting, he is still just outside the top 100 this season. 16 points per game, 54%, not a top 100 player. Yeah, that just shows you just how little he impacts those other categories. And when that shooting drops back down and he's at 45% over his last 4 games, he's almost outside the top 150. So he's not a 10-team league guy in my opinion, and he's just a fringe 12-teamer despite the really hot start to the season that Etuan Moore has had. The next game we take a look at, the San Antonio Spurs, they beat the Chicago Bulls 108-107. LaMarcus Aldridge has now shot 50% or higher in 3 of the past 4 games that have been his real struggle, so that's getting back on track. 20 and 8 with 2 steals and 2 blocks, while DeRozan had 21, 8 and 5. But I do want to highlight Derek White. He played 24 minutes. He had 8 and 6 with 2 steals. He played down late. He got into the game early as well. I'm not saying that we add Derek White in 12s or 14-team leagues, but I maintain that White is going to have a stretch of 12-team league value at some point this season. I don't know when it's going to be, but he is going to have that stretch, so keep an eye on him. This was one of those games where the Spurs starters started getting their asses kicked, so Pop just used the punishment method. Rudy Gay played only 17 minutes. If anyone drops him, I'd go and add him, no problem at all. I still think that he is a must-roster guy in 12-team leagues. Just see if he's available there anywhere. Well, Patty Mills had a nice game, 17 points on only 10 shots, but of course, that's red-hot shooting that's unlikely to be able to continue. For the Bulls, Justin Holiday's fantastic season continued, 17 points in 37 minutes, 5 triples and 2 blocks on 6 of 10 shooting. Now, a lot of people say, man, why is Justin Holiday's season rank so different from his projected rank? And there are a couple of reasons. I don't think he's going to be playing 37 minutes a night when Chris Dunn, Lauri Markkanen, and Punch Bob Shiploke return. I think that we will see, and Fred Hoiberg did mention this, I think, after the game, that they might be open to getting Jabari Parker back into the small forward position, or at least some minutes there. So even if Parker doesn't start at small forward, you'd think he'd take 7 or 8 minutes away from Justin Holiday. So that takes a big chunk of his value. He's also shooting at an extremely elevated level, and that's going to come back down. So while he is a top 50 player so far, and he is a clear must-roster player, Justin Holiday, when these other guys return in the next week, I think he's going to take a pretty significant hit, and just that's why the projections for him are so far off what his current season numbers are. Levine had 28, 8, and 7, but as we're having quite often at the moment, the efficiency is a real concern with him. While Shaq Harrison went scoreless, but added the peripherals: 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, and 2 blocks. The best steal streamer in the NBA. The Block Panther Wendell Carter is struggling, cannot stay out of foul trouble. If he gets dropped, I would add him. He is a real buy low at the moment. He will get his shit sorted, no doubt. He is still a top 100 player this season, but the last 7 games have been pretty poor. Not poor enough to push him outside the top 150. So when you think, oh man, he's been so shit, I need to drop him, he's the 137th ranked player. That's not terrible. 10 and 6, 2 assists, half a steal, a block on 46 and 94%. Hasn't hit a 3 over this time as well. He's 0 of 6 through that time frame. So that's going to come back up. And I have zero doubt that he is going to be much better than what he's been over these last couple of games. The foul issues will start to go away, his minutes will come back up, and the shots will start to go down at a little bit of a higher rate than we've seen. So to me, he is a buy low guy. And if he gets dropped, it's an easy add in my opinion. Jabari Parker had 18 and 10 with 2 steals. You have him on your roster, you see how it goes, and then we'll adjust when Portis and Markkanen comes back. It could really end in tears pretty quickly, but for the moment, you just hold on and see exactly what happens with old Jabari. The Indiana Pacers smashed the Jazz 121-88. No Victor Oladipo, and he will miss Tuesday's game as well. Daz Collison stepped up with 11 assists and 4 steals. As long as Oladipo's out, he has some value. But Tyreek Evans, who is starting in place of Oladipo, he just can't get anything going. I think it's safe to rule him out of 12-team league contention. Big games from Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis. 16 and 4 with 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks for Turner, while Sabonis had 13, 10 and 6, and Bojan Bogdanovic also got that increased role with Oladipo sidelined, 15 and 5. All 3 of those guys are 12-team league players pretty clearly. Bogdanovic more just while Oladipo was out, and that could drop off after that. We also had Dougie McDermott chime in with 21 in 23 minutes. We all know that is as fool's gold as it gets. Aaron Holiday, another solid game, 12 points in 22 minutes. I just don't see how he's going to be in the rotation when Oladipo returns, but he is really putting together some good performances that's probably going to see him in a significant role next season. For the Jazz, they're just a disaster at the moment. No Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal started. It was just a massive blowout. Derek Favors moved back into the starting lineup and had 13 and 8 in 24 minutes. Whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, it's just the same production every game. Crowder stunk, 9, 5, and 4. Not a 12-team league player in my opinion, while Rubio had 6, 3, and 8, and Gobert had 12 and 6. They've got a lot to work on, the Jazz. I think them getting home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs is a stretch given the way they're playing. There's a lot to figure out in Utah with how things are currently going down. Just not good stuff there at all, and very little to take away from that game fantasy-wise. The last game of the night was the Orlando Magic valiantly falling to the Golden State Warriors 116-110. Nick Vucevic continues unabated his all-star push, 30 and 12 with 6 assists. His efficiency bump has been amazing this season, 57% from the field. He has got a true shooting of 62% after being at 53% last season. That's really the big difference between what he's been able to do this year and last year. The usage is about the same, but it's that huge, almost 9% jump 8% jump in his true 8 percentage point jump in his true shooting percentage, which has bumped his numbers up. Usage gone from 26 to 26.7. It's the same. Assists have gone from 3.4 to 3.7, the same. Steals from 1 to 1.1. Blocks from 1.1 to 1. Threes from 1.1 to 1.1. He's rebounding the ball better, an additional 2 rebounds per game, and his efficiency is giving him an extra 4 points per game, and that's why he's gone from the 34th ranked player to the 11th ranked player. That is really what it is. It's the extra 2 minutes. It's the extra efficiency which is bumping his value up. I don't think he's going to remain as the 11th best player, but a top 30 finish is absolutely inside here for Vucevic, as long as he can keep this efficiency up. And if the Magic keep playing like this, they are not going to be trading him away, and his value should be pretty locked in for the rest of the season. It's been fantastic to see him turn into I've always liked him as a player, but he has taken his game significantly higher this season. DJ Augustine had 9 points with 9 assists and 2 steals, one of the best assist streams on the wire, while Mo Bamba had a nice little cameo, 11 and 6 in 15 minutes, but really just a deeper league player. Johnny Isaac, I mentioned earlier, he played 30 minutes with Gordon injured, 15 and 4 with 3 triples and 1 steal. I do believe in him as a 12-team league guy, so I'm still holding. While Terry Ross had a nice 28-pointer, 2 steals and 4 triples. He's a 3-point guy. He's a steals type of streamer. The Magic did make a change to their starting lineup. They put Johnny Simmons in there. I don't believe that John Simmons is good. I don't think that he is a 12 or probably even a 14-team league guy. And those 3 minutes that Weza Wundu played in this game, they probably won't be there next game either. So you're going to have Ross, Simmons, and Isaac playing those minutes at the 3 and the 4 behind Aaron Gordon. Gordon was terrible. 0 points in his 22 minutes with 4 rebounds, missed all 6 of his shots, and then suffered that back injury. For the Warriors, Kevin Durant had 49, 6 and 9, 2 steals, 2 blocks, and 4 triples, and on any other night, that would have been the monstrous line of the night, while Clay had 29 and 5 with 6 threes, and nobody else got into double digits. The centers, nothing there from Jordan Bell, from Damo Jones, from Kevon Looney. Iguodala had 2 points. Quinn Cook had 8, 6, and 4. Played 32 minutes, but Steph Curry is going to return, so you can move on from Cook in 12 and 14, and probably, honestly, 16-team leagues as well. Very little to talk about there with the Golden State Warriors and their fantasy value. All right, let's move on now. We'll talk some DFS. First of all, we'll go through the DFS action from Monday by looking at the perfect lineups. Over on DraftKings, we had Jimmy Harden have 89 points. Terry Ross, this is the perfect lineup. Jim Harden, Terry Ross, Markieff Morris, Dougie McDirt, Nick Vucevic, Kyle Korver, Kevin Durant, and Eric Gordon for a total of $407.25, and that cost $49,800. And then on FanDuel, Archer Jacquino, Darren Collison, Jim Harden, Eric Gordon, Doug McDirt, Kevin Durant, Larry Nance Jr., Markieff Morris, and Nick Vucevic for a total of $434.9, and that costs the full $60,000 dues. There are 5 games for us on Tuesday. We're going to be looking at DraftKings predominantly today with a little FanDuel kicker at the end. As we do when we go through all of this. Just a couple of quick things to mention, some player trends that Terry has provided to me here, again of Player Line Pro. Blake Griffin against the Knicks in his 12 games against the Knicks has a 2-point per game boost, as well as an increase in usage and true shooting, and we know the Knicks against big men have been a goldmine this season. Miles Turner steps his game up against Phoenix, only 4 games, but a 16 percentage point rise in his true shooting and an additional 3 points per game. Lonzo does well against Denver. Joshie Richardson ups his points per game average by 3.5 against the Hawks, while Reggie Jackson also steps his game up, an additional 2 points and 1 assist against New York, while the Blue Arrow, Jamal Murray, he loves playing against the Lakers. It's Lonzo versus Jamal. The Blue Arrow averages an additional 4 points per game with an additional 5 percentage points on his true shooting. So a couple of names there: Griffin, Miles Turner, Lonzo Ball, Joshie Richardson, Reggie Jackson, and Jamal Murray, who have had some past success against the teams that they're going to be taking on Tuesday. So let's talk about these games. The first one that we're looking at here is the New York Knicks, and they're taking on the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons are favored by 7, and the total is 220.5 points. The Knicks are going for 4 straight wins, but it's coming at the expense of the young players. Kevin Knox has been under 10 minutes per game in each of the last 2. Frank Ntilikina has been eliminated. Damian Dotson's out of the rotation. Alonzo Trias playing fewer minutes. It's a weird thing for a team who's no good to just completely eliminate their young players from playing, really. So we'll see how that goes, and I don't think anything's going to change in this game, because if it's worked for 3 games in a row, we know that coaches are really buoyed by the pleasure center response from getting a win, no matter even if it is really short-term vision induced. Let's look at the point guards. Trey Burks at 4,700. This is on DraftKings, of course. He's been giving you pretty consistent 30 to 35 type numbers, which at 4,700 is really tough to go past. So I do like that. You got Langston Galloway from the Pistons side of things, which I think is a fade, but I do like Reggie Jackson. 5,400. We heard those stats before. He should be a good option here for 30. He's getting his win back. His stamina's back up. I really like Reggie Jackson in this one. You've got Manny Moutier at 4,500, who's also averaging 30 points the last 3 games. It's coming on career-high steal and block numbers as well, so there's a little bit of flukiness associated with what Moutier is doing, but he's far from a terrible option. I just think there are better point guard options out there. Ntilikina is a terrible option, while Alonzo Trier at 38 would just be a tournament sort of a guy. Reggie Bullock's at 4,100. I don't like him really too much for fantasy because he doesn't do anything apart from score. Timmy Hardaway at 6,500. That's a really solid cash option. You should be getting you 30 points plus most nights. And then we look at small forward type players. Hazonia should start for the Knicks, but he's not doing too much. But in his last 3 games against the Pistons, he's averaged 24 points in 24 minutes. It's a point per minute. If he plays 20 minutes and gets you 20 points, which is what he's been doing recently, the 20 minutes, then that's a pretty good return. So just maybe a weird name to have a look at. Stan Johnson also playing pretty well, averaging 18 points over the last 3 at 3,700. That's not far off. I don't think that there's really much upside though in Stan. And then the big men. This is where what it's all about. Enes Kanter at 6,800, just putting up monster numbers, averaging 41 the last 5 games. Enes, nothing suggesting that he's going to go away from that. So happy to go with him. And I love the Pistons big men. Blake Griffin at 93 and Andre Drummond at 96. Big men against the Knicks have had a field day all season, and this should be no exception. Both of these guys have an opportunity to go for 50 plus. Then you have Noah Vonleh, who's at 5,600, who had a 46-point game the other day, and then last game he had a 20. His numbers are fueled by an elevated block rate and a very, very high 3-point shooting rate. He is inconsistent. I wouldn't want to be using him in cash. He's more of a tournament sort of a guy, while Mitchell Robinson's probably the ultimate tournament player with his proclivity for blocks. Over on FanDuel, I like Kanter, I like Hardaway, and Drummond and Griffin. They are all solid options. If you want to take a flyer on someone, Langston Galloway at 3,800 used to play for the Knicks. If you believe in revenge games, that was quite a few years ago. And Reggie Jackson at 5,800 also looks pretty okay over on the old FanDuel. The next game we take a look at is the Atlanta Hawks and the Miami Heat. There's no spread or no total in this game. We just don't know how much Hassan Whiteside's going to play. The Iron Shoulder, Goran Dragic and Tyler Johnson have both been ruled out already. So I guess that's what Vegas was waiting for before making that spread, but still nothing from them. On the Atlanta side of things, Kent Bazemore is listed as probable, and Alex Len is also listed as probable. But even if Bazemore does play, it would likely be coming off the bench. Justice Winslow is at 4,200 with both Dragic and Johnson out. There's a big opportunity here for Winslow. It's a fantastic matchup for him. He's averaged 27 points in 28 minutes the last 3 times against the Hawks. With Dragic and Johnson out, more ability for him to handle the ball. So at 4,200, I actually like him quite a bit. The Duke Wayne Ellington at 41 is a tournament sort of a player, while Trey Young at 66 played 30 minutes last game, 34 points. Eviscerated the Heat earlier on this season to the tune of 56 points. I do like Young in this one as well, while Jeremy Lin at 47 and Dwayne Wade at 53. Wado put up a monster last game with 53 points, not expecting that to continue, but I think both Lin and Wade do have decent cash value because their prices are so low. Scooter Magruder is a shooting guard. He's at 4,900. I have no interest in using him. While Kevin Huerter at 3,300 should start. He can rebound, he can assist, he can steal, he can block. He only had 2 shots in his last start, so give him his 10 or 11 shots. Maybe he can knock in 16 points, and I think he should be able to get you 24, 25 points fairly comfortably here. So I do like Huerter quite a bit, and if people are looking at last game's results, they'll probably be off him. While Joshie Richardson, we heard the stats that he does up his game against Atlanta. Only 7,400 on DraftKings. I think there's some pretty good value in Josh Richardson. I'm not big on Bazemore at 51, even though he did play well off the bench against the Hornets last game. For your wings, Jim Johnson at just the 4,000. He's doing nothing. I'm not really into him. But Torian Prince, the artist, he is at 5,200. Yeah, really down performances, averaging under 16 points his last 3 games. I'm in on him here, no worries. And DeAndre Bembry at 4,000, who's averaging 31 points over the last 3. I'm in on both of those guys. I think they can coexist. I think they can produce on the same night, and I really think that the way their price is set up makes them viable here. And then you got the big men, the Baptist, John Collins, 6,200. He was a monster last game. I'm all about Johnny here. I think he is a great option. And the Undertaker, Kelly Olynyk, Alex Len, Hassan Whiteside. I'm not really feeling any of those, especially Whiteside at 8,200. The intriguing one is going to be Bam Adebayo. A lot of people will be chasing his last game performance where he had 51 points. I think expecting that is folly. But at 4,500, you could hope for some upside. I'm just not certain that we're going to get enough minutes for Bam, so I'd end up fading him in most situations. Maybe throwing him in if you've got multiple tournament lineups. But I think just trying to chase what we saw last game will probably most times end in tears. On FanDuel, I like Winslow. I like the Baptist quite a bit. Prince and Richardson, Jeremy Lin, they're all got some decent cash value, especially Torian at 5,700. I think it's a good bounce back price. I like Bembry, Trae Young, and The Undertaker as well. And Bam Adebayo at 46 on FanDuel is looking okay there too. But again, it's still just more for tournaments rather than cash games at this point. The Toronto Raptors take on the Memphis Grizzlies. The Raptors are favored by 4.5, and the total is 205. Jaren Jackson Jr., he just needs to avoid foul trouble. We don't know what the Raptors are going to do in terms of starting. I think we'll get Serge Ibaka back starting against Marc Gasol, a stretchy big man. But Valanciunas has started the last 3. That is still up in the air there, of course, as to who is going to be the starter. On DraftKings, point guard Mike Conley is at 7,700. He's averaging 45 over the last 5. One of the best cash plays on the entire board, in my opinion. Now, I know the Raptors have really good defenders. The Jedi, OG Anunoby.
Hello there.
I'm a fun guy.
The fun guy, Kawhi Leonard, Dan Green, Kyle Lowry. But with that price that Conley's on, I think that he can just, you can absorb a bad night from him and still get value. So I really do like Mike Conley here. Kyle Anderson's at 4,800. I think that's a relatively solid option for about 24, 25 points. Not bad for cash. While Lowry at 78. The Grizzlies' defense is forcing a lot of turnovers, slower pace. I think you can probably do better than Lowry, or just by looking opposite him by taking Conley for $100 cheaper would be the direction that I would go with. Delon Wright, Fred VanVleet, not interested. For the shooting guards, Dan Green's at 42. Just for tournaments for Green. He's too unreliable otherwise. And then you've got Marshawn Brooks, Wayne Selden, and Garrett Temple, who I don't really care for. And then you've got the fun guy himself, Kawhi Leonard, 9,400. He's giving you 45 almost every night, which is fantastic at that price. He's a solid cash guy with some significant upside. JaMychal Green is not really doing it for me, nor is the Jedi at 3,700. Big man, Valanciunas at 5,300, averaging 33 the last 5, all starts. I think that might be reduced in this one against Gasol, so he is a fade to me. As for Gasol, 8,900, because he is giving you 54 DraftKings points, Marc Gasol, over his last 5 games. His last 3 games against Toronto, 45 DraftKings points. The Raptors, in terms of giving up numbers to opposition centers, are slightly better than average in terms of beneficial stuff for opposition centers. So I think that he is fine. That is a pretty hefty price to pay for Gasol, but the way he's playing, he's giving it to you nearly every night. Ibaka's at 5,700. Production's been a bit muted, but I love the fact that that price has come down. So I'd be happy to go back on Ibaka here. I think he'll start. I think he'll play an extra 4 or 5 minutes against Gasol. But that ridiculous hot stretch that he was having in terms of shooting has clearly dropped off. Nobody would be able to maintain that level of shooting that Serge was earlier in the season. So I think that he's worth a look here as well. On FanDuel, I do like Kawhi at 10,000. Not a lot else really stands out here. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. on FanDuel at 7,100 has some appeal, but the foul trouble is what you got to really bank against, or you bet against. Is he going to play 30 minutes? Because if he does, he beats that number. If he gets into foul trouble and plays 19 minutes, he won't give you back 7,100. So he's a GPP guy at this point in his career. Not much else really standing out on FanDuel. The 8,800 for Mike Conley is not super appealing over there. Let's go on to the next game. We are talking about the Indiana Pacers and the Phoenix Suns. Victor Oladipo is out of this game. The point guard's Daz Collison's at 4,400. He had a strong game today. Another opportunity. I think that's a pretty safe cash play with Oladipo sidelined. You got Az Holiday at 3,600, who's giving you 20 points a night, which at 3,600 is not a bad way to try and get a cash lineup to get some of those other big guys in there. If you know he's going to get 20 a night, which he's done basically every night that he's played, over the last 5 games, his lowest score is 19 points, which is better than $3,600 worth of value. So Aaron Holiday has been super consistent. Corey Joseph at 46, not really feeling too much there. While Devin Booker at 8,600, this guy is just doling out the assists. He's averaging 47 points his last 5 games, 8,600. Absolutely no worries with using Devin Booker. Tyreek's at 52 would only be for tournaments. Now, he has wrecked the Suns in the past, averaging 41 points the last 3 times, but he just is not the same guy in this Indiana offense, so it's hard to rely upon him. While Bojan Bogdanovic is at 49, he's giving you big numbers. His lowest score in his last 5 is 27. With Oladipo out, I think he's a safe enough floor guy to consider for cash situations. Mikal Bridges is at 3,600. His minutes are fine. He's averaging 28 minutes over his last 5, but it's only 19 points. But 19 points is not bad at 3,600. Still, there's an element of risk in using McCall. I think the minutes are going to be fine, and I think that at least some of his shots will go in. Last game, he was only like 1 of 8 from the field, but still had 14 points because he had 3 steals. So I think he's okay if you're looking for a very cheap guy. Thaddeus Young is at 4,100, a guy who does up his game against Phoenix. I think that this is an opportunity to use him for tournaments. That's very, very cheap for Thad. His production's been bad, but I think it's an option there to use him. Well, Tony Warren Jr. ejected last game, so that drops his averages, just 12 points before he got ejected. He's at 6,100, the best 3-point shooter in the NBA. At 6,100, I think he is a relatively solid cash sort of a guy. Ariza at 53 is a pretty strong fade, as is Doug McDirt after his 33-pointer today. For the big men, Sabonis at 6,700. Big men, it's like playing the Knicks, the Western Conference variety, going against the Suns. So Sabonis at 6,700, lock it in for 30 plus. I'm pretty confident with that. While Miles Turner loves playing Phoenix too, he should be looking at 30 plus. And at 5,500, both of those guys have enough value to be rostered. DeAndre Ayton on the other side at 7,100. He is averaging 42 points his last 3 contests. Opposition centers have struggled against the Pacers. His inability to block shots, I think limits him, and I think this could be a bit of an issue for Ayton. So I reckon he'd be somewhat of a fade here, while Richaun Holmes at 3,300. He can produce in limited minutes, we know that, averaging 24 points over the last 3 at 3,300. It's like 7x value just in those limited minutes. So he is someone that maybe you could throw into a lineup, but I wouldn't have super confidence in it really going big. On FanDuel, Bridges at 42, some nice GPP value. 68 for TJ Warren's okay. Collison at 49 is worth a look, as is the Deuce at 48. The big men, 7,000 for Sabonis and 63 for Turner. Far from as appealing as it is on DraftKings, but they both have a very, very tasty matchup, and I think they can both return value on FanDuel as well. Let's go on to the last game of the night. It is the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are favored by 4. The total is 215.5. Nikola Jokic, he needs to be more aggressive. The numbers for him recently have not been good, averaging just 37 points over his last 3. But an opportunity here for him. At point guard, it's Lonzo versus the Blue Arrow. Lonzo Ball is at 5,600. He's been giving you, despite being a bit up and down, 28 a game over the last 3, but his last 3 against Denver have yielded 41 a game. I like Lonzo Ball here. Monty Morris at 41. He exploded against the Lakers earlier this year, dropping 41 points in a red-hot shooting performance. I wouldn't be looking at Monty outside of tournaments. While Jamal Murray, his minutes are through the roof. 38 minutes a game over the last 3. It's yielded 38 fantasy points in those games. He's at 6,900.
Giggity!
Plays well against the Lakers. A 40-point outing should not be unexpected from Jamal, so I do like him in this one. Shooting guards, Gaz Harris is questionable. We don't know if he's going to play.
Nice, Gary!
If he is in at 5,600, I would really, really like that. All indications to me are that Gaz is going to be ready, so I think we should be looking at him as more on the probable side of questionable. Brandon Ingram at 5,800, despite how poor he's been for fantasy, at 5,800, he's actually getting you 28 or 29 per game, and I don't think that would be a terrible cash play, probably limited upside. While Caldwell Pope's minutes have been up, he's at 3,600, he's giving you about 20 a night. I'd still probably lean more tournaments, and he wouldn't be a high priority guy. Malik Beasley, Josh the Hitman Hart, Lance Stevenson, I don't really see the interest there. At small forward, it's Trey Lyles at 38. But of course, the guy we want to look at is LeBron James.
LeBron James.
10,900 for LeBron. He has averaged 68 points the last 3 times against Denver. Really hard to go past him. A great price under 11. I love LeBron for this slate on DraftKings. Don't know why I said it that way. Kyle Kuzma at 5,200. Strong last game from Kuz. I would not be locking him in for cash. He'd been pretty piss poor prior to that, averaging just 23 over his last 5, which included that 36-point performance. And then you got Juancho Hernan-Gomez at 4,800, who had a big game himself last time out. There's a little bit of tournament upside there, but they're both pretty consistent stayaways to me. At center, Nikola Jokic is at 8,800 because his numbers haven't been great, but he is still averaging 40 over his last 5. I think that he would be he'd be worth looking at, but more just for tournaments with how, I guess, passive he's been offensively. And JaVale McGee, 7 blocks last game at 5,400. I like the fact that that price is down there. That does bring him into play as a nice, cheap center. Millsap at 59, I don't really feel that. Plumlee at 35. Mason Plumlee is averaging 27 points over his last 5 and 34 points over his last 3 at 3,500. You would take that every day of the week. So that could be a very, very sneaky tournament play or even a solid cash guy. He's getting 20 minutes a game with Jokic struggling. So you wouldn't want to play both of those guys because if Jokic starts going off and doesn't get in foul trouble, then Plumlee's minutes will be reduced. But he's putting up very, very strong numbers at the moment, Mace. So that is worth paying attention to. While Tyson Chandler, the little flurry he had since he signed is obviously over, averaging just the 9 DFS points in his last 3 games. On FanDuel, Jokic at 9,000 is an option. Blue Arrow at 73 and LeBron at 11-2. I love LeBron at 11-2 over on FanDuel as well. Monty Morris 45. Not too much more to see over there on the old FanDuel. All right, let's go through our studs and values. Over on DraftKings, I like Blakey Griffin as my stud at 9,300, and my value play is Enes Kanter at 6,800. On FanDuel, my stud is LeBron James at 11,200. He is averaging 64 FanDuel points the last 3 games against Denver. Big on him there, while the value play is Justice Winslow at 5,000. My Yahoo stud is Marcus Gasol at 35. He's been fantastic this season, and the value is DeAndre Bembry at $12. And on Draft Stars for you Aussies, Blakey Griffin at 16.9 is my stud. Great matchup against the Knicks, and the value play is the Baptist, John Collins at 10,110. They haven't adjusted his price anywhere near high enough. So have a look at John Collins over on DraftStars. That'll wrap it up for today's show, guys. Go and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and on Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating or review, or on YouTube, hit subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment, all those great things. And also check out the fantasy check-ins that I did over on YouTube. I'm going to aim to do 3 of those a day, a 2-minute segment just covering what's happening with every team. We'll cover all 30 teams over a 2-week period. I'm going to merge them into little 6-minute podcast snippets as well each day. So just a little extra bit of content that you'll get each day. So go and like those videos, watch all those, and make sure you're downloading that podcast as well. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Go check out our sponsor today, actionheat.com/lockedon for 20% discount on your warming clothes. And we are done. Guys, thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Ryan Archer-Giacono.